Hello everyone and welcome to another tier list video, and what will probably be the longest tier list video I ever do, just because of how ridiculously massive this band's discography is. Today I'm going to be doing a Weezer tier list, and this is going to be quite the undertaking because, as I said, these guys have a ridiculous amount of music and a ridiculous number of albums. Now I will say I'm a Weezer apologist. I'm a huge Weezer fan. I have been for a couple years now. So my ratings of their albums are a little skewed compared to a lot of people's because I actively like the band and I am a fan of a lot of their more recent output. One thing I'm going to mention beforehand is that I've never listened to the Teal album. I'm not going to include it in my ranking, so please just keep that in mind. Hopefully that's not going to be too devastating to any of the Teal album fans out there. If they do exist at all, but if it is, I am deeply sorry. I will listen to it one day, maybe. Anyways, as usual, we're going to go in chronological order. Each time before I place an album on the tier list, I'll explain, give my reasoning, give some favorite tracks, etc, etc. You know the drill. Let's jump right into 1994 with the Blue Album. Now obviously the Blue Album is what Weezer is most famous for. It's generally their most critically acclaimed album, and for good reason. The Blue Album is such a well-rounded, powerful album, and it's always been clear to me how much effort they put into this album, and obviously I feel like it captures something that they never really managed to capture afterwards. Many people see that as a bad thing. I still think that they were able to create good music since the Blue Album, but it's certainly true that the sound and feeling that they captured on this album is not something they really managed to do again, for better or for worse. Naming some favorite tracks: Buddy Holly, Undone the Sweater Song, Only in Dreams, which is one of their best songs ever, and my favorite Weezer song ever, Say It Ain't So. But you know, this is only a 10-song album, and all 10 songs are amazing. I would honestly say this is a 10 out of 10 album for me, and it's going to go right up to the S tier. And then moving on to their second album in 1996, we have Pinkerton. Now, where the Blue Album felt kind of perfectly crafted, like each song feels very intentional, properly put together, Pinkerton is the antithesis of the Blue Album in that it's so raw. The production is more amateurish because they produced it themselves, and it just feels like this outpouring of emotions into songs. And once again, it's a sound that they have never captured since, for better or for worse. But that's what makes this album so special to me, and what makes it possibly their best album to me. Songs like Pink Triangle, Across the Sea, where the lyrics are very strange to read and look at as a surface level and almost come off as creepy, but if you understand the headspace and the mindset that Rivers was in when writing these lyrics, and also just kind of the emotions that this album's trying to capture, this like hopelessness and this feeling of being outcast, then this is an album that really captures his headspace at the time and really is very impressive to me. And once again, favorite tracks: Falling for You, Across the Sea, Why Bother, No Other One, and my absolute favorite track on here, which once again could be my favorite Weezer track. It's kind of a toss-up between this and Say It Ain't So, which is The Good Life. I absolutely love that song. And honestly, this album is toe-to-toe with the Blue Album for me. Once again, I'd say a 10 out of 10. For me, though, that's very debatable. To me, even, it's debatable. I'm debating it in my head right now, but I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to leave it above the Blue Album. Then let's move on to the Green Album. 2001, a big gap between Pinkerton and this album, and unfortunately, I would say a big gap in quality. That's not to say I dislike the Green Album. I think it's still a fun album, and there's a lot to be liked about it, but at the same time, it feels far more formulaic and too set in its ways compared to these two albums. And I don't know, it just doesn't capture the same energy as Pinkerton or the Blue Album for me. So I would say it's either a solid 6 out of 10 to a light 7 out of 10, but I'm going to put it in B tier. And I think it'll happily live there. Honestly, there's so many albums here that I may end up changing my rankings later in the video, which I haven't done in any of my other tier lists, but that could happen in this video. Oh, and to name some favorite tracks from the Green album, I would say Don't Let Go, Hash Pipe, Island in the Sun, and Knockdown Drag Out. Then let's move to 2002's Maladroit, which I think really picks things up when compared to the Green album. For me, this album just, it's heavier, it's darker, but it just hits a lot harder than the Green album does for me. And yeah, overall, I just like this project more. Similarly to the Green album, it's a lot of very short songs, a lot of short ideas. But to me, the ideas on these songs are different enough from each other to be more interesting as standalone songs, and also just are more interesting songs. So yeah, Maladroit is a much better record than the Green album for me. I would say it's a 7 out of 10. Some of my favorite songs are Slob, Slave, Keep Fishing, American Gigolo, the first track. And yeah, it's a good overall album. Not one of their best, but not one of their worst either. And I'm going to go right here above the Green album. Now, where I would say the Green album was a little bit disappointing and Maladroit was pretty decent, Make Believe is easily one of Weezer's worst albums, and is an album that, quite frankly, I never return to and don't like to return to. For me, this album just is a whole bag of nothing, and it's so nothing that I can't even recall most of the tracks on here. There are obviously a couple that stand out to me. Perfect Situation and This Is Such a Pity, namely. And honestly, I'm a bit of a Beverly Hills defender. Is it a great song? No. Is it still a pretty good song? Yes. But the rest of this album just does nothing for me, and it's easily one of their worst albums, and I'm going to put it 3 out of 10. I'm going to put it into D tier. Next we have the Red album, and you know, the Red album is the weirdest of the Color albums because it feels like it's the least talked about, just in general, but I still think it's a really interesting project. I actually tend to lean more towards liking Red more than I like Green, and what I like about the Red album is some of the choices to let the other band members both sing and write songs, for better or for worse. And you know, there's some really great tracks on here. Troublemaker, The Greatest Man That Ever Lived, Pork and Beans. That first 3-song run is really good, and I just like the whole album. I think, you know, there's a lot of good bonus tracks that come with it as well, and it's just a solid project, even though it kind of has some ups and downs compared to the other Color albums. But yeah, I would say it's like a 7 out of 10, and I'll slot it here. And next is the infamous Ratitude. What is there to say about this album? It's awful. Genuinely one of the worst albums I've ever had to endure. I would never want to ever listen to this album again. I can't believe that a band I actually like made an album this bad. And yeah, no, Ratitude sucks. It's good that they managed to pick up their career back up after making an album like this, because man, it's just so bad. If I had to pick some favorite tracks, I would say If You're Wondering If I Want You To is not terrible, and Can't Stop Partying has gotten to the point where I ironically like it. But other than that, this is a terrible album. It's a 1 out of 10 to a 2 out of 10, and it's going right here at the absolute bottom of the tier list. Now, Hurley was meant to be their sort of comeback album after such a massive failure with Ratitude, and while I think in some ways it achieves that, I would say that Hurley definitely brings things back to a better stage than they were on Ratitude. But for me, Hurley is a bit of a nothing album. It's not something I return to much because I don't really care much about the songs on here. But I do like some of them. Memories is a great song. Brave New World, Trainwrecks, and Hang On, I would say, are some highlights for me. And it's a 6 out of 10. It's going to go in the C tier, and I'm going to put Green above it here. So there you go, there's my rearrangement, because this will be the 6 out of 10s, 7, 8, 10 and 9, whatever trash. Anyways, after Hurley, we have what many would consider to be their true comeback album, Everything Will Be Alright in the End, and this is 100% a comeback album. This is an amazing album. It's so re-listenable, it's so addicting, it's so catchy, and it just really brings you back to what makes Weezer great when they are at their best, which is just good, simple rock music. On songs like Back to the Shack, Ain't Got Nobody, Da Vinci, Cleopatra, I've Had It Up to Here, and what I really love on this project is the Future Scope trilogy, as it's known. The last 3 tracks on it, which kind of form this sort of mostly instrumental, epic outro to the whole album, and kind of serve as this big kind of celebration piece, and just make this a really cool project overall, and one that I will always come back to, and one that is clearly, for me, in the upper echelon of their discography, and probably always will be. So yeah, this is going to go in the A tier. I would say it's an 8 out of 10, a strong 8 out of 10. But while many people see this as the comeback album, where Weezer truly come into their own, for me, like, their peak form is on the White Album, and this album is just, in my opinion, their best album since Pinkerton, since the Blue Album, and the closest they've ever come to the Blue Album, just in terms of how amazingly catchy all of the songs on here are, from songs like California Kids to Thank God for Girls, Wind in Our Sail, Do You Want to Get High, King of the World, Jacked Up, which might be my favorite on here. There's just not a single bad song, and it's just so impressive that this late in their career they were still able to craft an amazing, well-rounded album, just full of catchy, fun tracks that really showcase why people like Weezer and why people enjoy their music, and why I enjoy their music, and why I like Weezer. And for that reason, it's going to go in the S tier. It's not a 10 out of 10, it's more like a 9 out of 10, but it definitely deserves its spot there. And now we head into Weezer's pop phase with their 2017 album, Pacific Daydream. I've seen a lot of people defend this album and say that they really like it. For me, I can't quite get behind it, but I don't hate it, and I think it still has some really fun songs on it, but it just really feels like it falls off halfway through and even towards the end. But the first half of this album is pretty damn good. Mexican Fender I really like. That's kind of a very different song to the rest of the album, but it's a great track. Feels Like Summer is a song I will always defend. I know a lot of people hate it, but me personally, I like it. Happy Hour is pretty good, and Get Right might be my favorite song on here. Overall, I'd say 6 out of 10. Nothing crazy, but it's still a respectable effort, and for me slots in right about here. So, the Black Album. People are going to hate my take on this album because I really like it, and I don't know why, but this is one I come back to a lot. I think it is actually good pop Weezer rather than just okay pop Weezer, and I don't know, it's just a fun album. Can't Knock the Hustle is an amazing song. Zombie Bastards is fun. Living in LA I love. High as a Kite is genuinely beautiful. I'm just being honest, and Too Many Thoughts in My Head are pretty decent songs, and the rest of the album is still okay for me. There's a couple songs I don't like. The Prince Who Wanted Everything and Byzantine I'm not a fan of, but I don't know, I just like this album, and I can't really stop myself from liking this album. I'd say it's a 7 out of 10, and it slots in at the top of B tier for me. And once again, people are going to be so confused why I would ever have that take. I don't know, I just like it, and I can't really stop myself from liking it. It's just fun. So then we move to their 2021 run of albums, which is obviously OK Human and Van Weezer. So OK Human, this album blew me away. Just the orchestral instrumentation that they recorded at Abbey Road is something I never thought I'd see Weezer doing, and it produces some of their best songs in years. It's just an amazing album through and through, and you know, even though occasionally the lyrics can border on a little cringy, it doesn't really ruin the album for me, and it still has some amazing songs. All my favorite songs, Numbers, Playing My Piano, Mirror Image. Playing My Piano and Mirror Image as a duo are amazing. Bird with a Broken Wing, Dead Roses. It's just so different from anything they've ever done, but somehow they were able to execute it perfectly and make an incredible album. I would say it doesn't quite reach the upper echelon for me, but I would be lying if I didn't say it was going to go here. It's definitely A tier. Honestly, could be above Everything Will Be Alright for me. I think we're going to put it there. Now, in comparison, Van Weezer, the album that they hyped up for 2 full years, I could give less of a shit about. The first half has some pretty good songs on it, and then it just falls off a fucking cliff. I mean, it could have been a very solid EP. It definitely could have been a very solid EP. But all of the best tracks were the singles. Hero, all the good ones, The End of the Game, I Need Some of That, Beginning of the End, and then who the fuck cares about the rest of the album? It's a 6 out of 10 because it's not awful, but here. It was a very disappointing album for me, and I don't hate it, and like I said, the first half is an 8 out of 10, but because the second half falls off so hard for me, it's going to stick at a 6 out of 10. And then we have the Season series of EPs. I'll be quick with these because there's 4 of them, and, you know, they're short projects anyways. You know, I think Seasons has been a mixed bag, and it took a while to really get going, but it did get going towards the end, and there's been some really good tracks that have come out of it. Starting with, obviously, Spring. I would say Spring is, for me, the weakest project out of the 4 EPs, but there's still some good songs on it, and I really like the single A Little Bit of Love, and the last 3 tracks, The Sound of Drums, All This Love and Wild at Heart. I can't stand the song Opening Night. Well, can't stand is a bit strong. It's just my least favourite song on here. But I would say this is a 6 out of 10 EP. I don't hate it or anything, and it's pretty easy listening. I'd probably place it here. I'd say that's fair. Summer started to pick things up a bit, but it's a bit... My problem with Summer is that it feels very samey and kind of like they were trying to fill it out, and a 7-song project should not feel like that. There are some highlights: Records, Blue Like Jazz, and Thank You and Good Night. But I don't know. This is still a 6 out of 10 for me. It just doesn't feel like... It doesn't feel like it quite does enough to elevate it too far above Spring, but it's still, you know, I enjoy it more than I think Van Weezer, and I don't enjoy it more than Van Weezer. I think it's... I mean, if I'm just talking about that first half of Van Weezer, then this is going to go here. It could go here. It's kind of a toss-up, but a better project than Spring, but still not quite like anything that blows me away just yet. But speaking of being blown away, I was 100% blown away by Season's Autumn just because of how much better than the first 2 it is. There is not a single bad track on here, and, well, I'm not a huge fan of Taste Like Pain, but I can still appreciate it. But it's just such a solid record, and every single song is fun and interesting and does something that Weezer hasn't really done before, or kind of plays with Weezer's usual style and adds new things to it. Can't Dance, Don't Ask Me is an amazing opener. What Happens After You, I unironically really love, and I know a lot of people hate it. Francesca is just a really solid song. Get Off on the Pain is great. Run Raven Run is one of Weezer's best songs, point blank period. It's an amazing song. And just, I love this project, and it's going to go right at the top of B tier for me, because I don't know, it's one of Weezer's best projects, honestly. Now, Winter was kind of hyped up right from the start as being the best Seasons EP, and it kind of fell flat at that for me. It's not as good as Autumn, in my opinion. Also, just kind of sounds like Weezer, which I was kind of hoping that this EP would have sort of a more melancholy feel to it, because it feels like that's what it was being described as before it came out. Which is not to say that I dislike it. I still like it more than Summer and Spring, and I think it's a really good project overall. I Want a Dog, Basketball, Dark Enough to See the Stars, The Deep and Dreamless Sleep. It's a good album, but it's not as good as Autumn, and I feel like they could have done more. But still pretty solid. I would place it, once again, it's 7 out of 10. I would place it, I'm gonna go like here, I think here. And yeah, finally, that is my Weezer tier list. Let me know what you think. Debate me, argue with me, tell me I'm a complete moron. You know, as usual, you know, this is just my opinion, and sometimes you're gonna absolutely hate my opinions, but that's what keeps you coming back. So yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in another video at some point in the future, hopefully. Yeah, thank you so much, and goodbye.